So, John, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to a great presentation on System Fusion.
All righty. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My voice is just actually getting better after some laryngitis. Because in addition to all those things, I also am a husband and a father, and my daughters are in volleyball. So the whole weekend was spent with volleyball, yelling and screaming and cheering them on. So I it paid a little bit of a toll today. So with that being said, I'm going to actually share my screen here. And I think, can everybody see okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk to you about Yaesu System Fusion tonight. Thank you for having me come in. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, though. What we're going to talk about is about maybe a combination of about 1 hour of a 4 to 5 hour class we are working at doing at different locations nationwide on Yaesu System Fusion. Yaesu System Fusion right now is by far the most used digital voice mode worldwide right now. And the interesting part about it is where we get some of those statistics is actually from some of our dealers, as well as what we see different clubs, groups, organizations using around the world. And the reason that Yaesu System Fusion is so easy to use is because it was designed with that purpose. And we'll go over that tonight. But kind of what I'm talking about is that we're going to be kicking off our first official class at Hamcation down in Florida in February here. And we're going to be going across the entire United States at different locations. And this is going to be a 4 to 5 hour fusion class that we're offering that takes you from 2013, which we'll talk about tonight, what happened then, all the way up through the end of the class, actually allowing people to actually have their hands on repeaters, link repeaters using our IMRS technology, do wires X, do all these kind of things like that on there. This class is very in-depth, hand-on, and in person. So I'm not sure how many of you maybe get to different events, different groups, associations, those kind of things like that, but just stay tuned. If you go to our website, systemfusion.yaesu.com. Once again, systemfusion.yaesu.com. That will have the listing of the classes. Being that the class is so intense, as we kind of say, because it's learning, and then you actually, like, once again, do hands-on. It's not just sitting and listening to boring PowerPoints. You're going to bring a radio. You're going to learn how to handshake, do all these kind of fun things like that. We are limiting class sizes. So 2026 is going to be a big year. And that's why I'm saying part of this presentation tonight is just a small snippet of what it is. So I always offer that because people think like I do the presentation and it's like, oh, that's it to Yaesu System Fusion. Well, that's pretty simple and easy. And then they get into it and they found out, man, the sky's the limit on what you can do with it. And yes, it is on there. So we'll jump into it. In addition to all those kind of things that I have, I also am a Fusion product expert and VHF, UHF product specialist. And then, of course, they throw in the title of national sales manager on there. A little bit about myself, kind of what was kind of already covered. I've been licensed since the mid 1990s. Actually, people saying you're vanity, it's a vanity call on 9 UPC. No, that was the luck of the draw back in about 1993, I think it was. Now, for some of you that may not know it, that's back in the days where we maybe kind of still had to take the test with a chisel and a hammer, and we went and we gave it hoping that we would pass, and then you kind of like we're watching them going, oh, getting here, I passed. And then they sent off your application to the FCC. And 2 years later, well, it felt like 2 years later, it was more like 16 weeks. But when you're a young kid, it's 2 years. And then you finally got it. And I'll never forget at that time, people didn't know you could actually call the FCC and actually get someone. I know that's how long ago it was. And anyways, they went and you can go to the licensing department and you didn't need FRNs or anything. You just gave them your name. And each day I called. And I finally got my license in July of that year. And then when I got my license, I told my grandma, my dad, everything. I was like, hey, I got it, and everything like that. And then the phone bill came in August. And then I kind of wish I didn't call every day almost in July to Washington, D.C. from Wisconsin. But that's neither here nor there. So with that being said, I do know, I want to preface it that I have used all the digital modes. I actually run a digital voice network on the amateur side. I also do run digital voice networks on the commercial side on there. But I'm not telling you this as like, oh, like, hey, this person's just all hail Yaesu. No, I've used these modes. I know what the limitations are of the different modes. I know what the limitations are of System Fusion, but I also know what the feature and the benefits are from the different digital modes on there. So kind of diving into it, like if any of you do this, if you understand this reference, I like you even better. I'll send you a hat. I'm going to do Sophia Petrillo from Golden Girls, Picture It, 2013. And what happened was, I get that in reference? No? Golden Girls? Okay. All right. All right. Hey, I want to see what kind of crowd I get, right? I date myself sometimes. All right. So here's what happened. 2013 was a big year for Yaesu because in 2013, at the actual Tapper conference, which was actually in Washington State at that time, System Fusion was released. Dennis Matzenbacher, K7BV, who unfortunately a year ago, January 2025, became a silent key, great mentor. He's the one that kind of recruited me, headhunted me to get into Yaesu. He introduced Fusion at the Tapper conference of 2013. Now, here's the funny part that people don't realize. Did you know that Yaesu System Fusion was actually planned and almost came out in 2010? The reason it didn't come out was for one thing. Does anybody Yaesu aficionados know what happened then back about 2010 with what happened with Yaesu and Vertex standard? Does anybody know? Sorry.
So, didn't they?
Very correct. What happened is that we had amateur, marine, aviation, and LMR public safety. So LMR public safety is the business commercial world. And we went up against a major player in New York. And that major player was Motorola. And even movies, Hollywood even got it right. We went in as Vertex and we sold all new radios to New York Port Authority. And when you sell to New York Port Authority, you're selling it to like customs, police, fire, EMS, everybody, everything. We sold that on there. Now, Motorola's philosophy that they've always had, if you can't beat them, you got to buy them. So Motorola came and they said, okay, Vertex, really, you beat us. And they gave us a nice change. Now, this is before my time. So I'm looking on the protected scrolls, right? I'm getting this information from there. And Motorola came in and says, okay, we're going to buy you. So 2010, they bought us. But what happened was they said, okay, wait a minute. We're going to halt production. We're going to halt anything progressing forward. Let's let the dust settle and everything. So for a few years, 2 years, technically, 2010 to 2012, we were kind of like part of Motorola. Well, then what happened was Motorola was like, you know what? We got Vertex. That's all we wanted. Okay. Because remember, we couldn't beat you. So we bought you. And then they were going to get rid of, and I remember reading in QST and CQ and Popular Communications, right? No, we're really dating ourselves, right? All these articles saying, Yaesu, are they dead? You know, and like they remember, I saw one that had like a big foot that had a Motorola symbol on it, pushing down on Yaesu. And what happened? No, we didn't. We spun ourselves back. We said, okay, we're going to buy ourselves from Motorola, but we're only going to do amateur, marine, and aviation. So they kept Vertex. And as a matter of fact, if you look and if you're a Motorola aficionado or stuff, you'll see that they still make quote unquote Vertex products because they kept that line of their radios. What happened in 2012 is we said, okay, we're amateur, marine, we're aviation, we're back, baby. Let's go ahead and continue on. And what we did is we took that information of what Fusion was in 2010 that had to be put on hold. We took it out of the safe, the vault, and said, you know what? We're going to go with it now. So that's what happened in 2013. But what was that idea concept in 2010? That is what Fusion is today. Well, there was 3 design concepts it was built on. So the first design concept was it had to be high quality digital voice operation. If Fusion was going to be digital voice, why would you, and let's face it, let's honestly ask yourselves, if the digital voice quality is not good, why would you go from digital voice or code to digital voice from FM, right? If FM is like what we're hearing now, but then the digital voice was like, you know, like if it sounds like one of those speaking spells out of the 80s, there I dated myself again. All right. What was the point in digital voice, really? So what we did is, and I'll cover this in a little bit, we used technology that was already out there that was proven to be out there, which was the C4FM technology with FDMA. So that's high quality digital voice. Secondly, It had to be easy to use operation. And let me be honest with you, go to the store, buy a radio. If literally you couldn't take that radio out to the parking lot, plug it into your car, and get on the air and start talking in digital, not going to work. It's not going to work at all. And you'll see this when we kind of cover some of the technology aspects on there. And then the final part is it had to have versatility and flexibility. If it wasn't versatile and it wasn't flexible, if the digital voice technology had high quality, easy to use, but it puts you in sort of this rut, this kind of like you can only do this with it and nothing else, then it wasn't going to be worthwhile. And you can actually kind of see that how our system, and we'll cover here in a minute, like how you can use Fusion and how Fusion is actually being used, which once again, as I said, makes it one of the most popular used RF modes on there. And if you want to do this, I know Colorado, you guys, I'm not 100% sure where exactly you are located in Colorado. Like if it's out in the Midwest, I'm kind of lost. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you. I live in northern Wisconsin. It was 34 below wind chill today. Right. So, but you go into HRO, ham radio outlet. I know they got one kind of in Colorado there, but if you look at the other places, if you're not an HRO fan, you look at everybody that's got hotspots, right? People, there's this holy trend out there that I'll even give you an example here, like a Zoom spot here that I have. Okay. 9 times out of 10, people are buying these Zoom spots and they're saying, what radio I use with the Zoom spot? And guess what? Everybody, all the dealers are saying, go with the FT70 because it's easy, simple, and it's cost effective. Between the cost of the Zoom spot and as an example, and between the cost of the radio, you're at about a $300 price tag and you're able to talk around the world in digital voice. Plus, you also have a radio that you can use on your local repeaters, whether they're analog or digital. So what did we choose for this high quality digital voice technology? Well, one of the whole points of going digital voice, and this is not just amateur, this is commercial, especially the public safety world that I'm in, right? The whole point of going digital is twofold. One, we need to compress our signals so we have more. We're very crowded, right? I'm not sure what you guys use for public safety there. We're VHF. We're neck and neck. We're bumping into our frequencies, right? I mean, here in Wisconsin, there's not a lot of room on the frequencies. But now if we take and go digital, we can compress that signal to half of what an FM signal used to be, right? FM is usually about 25 kilohertz. Look at the screen on there. Fusion is 12 and a half kilohertz. So automatically, by going digital voice with Fusion, you are going to be able to put 2 voice paths for Fusion down that same bandwidth on there. And what we were able to do with Fusion is we were able to even go a little bit smaller. So if you take a far look on your left side, if anybody has, and I can kind of see some people in there, how many people have a Fusion radio? Does anybody raise their hand? Is there? Okay, good. Okay, I will send you Christmas cards now. Anybody else that doesn't have it? No Christmas cards. All right. So what we did though is that when we use DN, how many people use DN mode, right? It's kind of the de facto mode, right? What's happening is on that left-hand side where we're taking your voice and we've compressed your voice down to 6.25 kilohertz in bandwidth. That is 1/4 the bandwidth of an FM analog repeater that's in the amateur radio world today. So automatically we're saving space. But now on some models, okay, that have the GPS in there and we could put forward air correctioning down that other 6.25 kilohertz space. So we're condensing it down by half, but now what we're doing is we're actually increasing the range of the voice. Because what's going to happen with audio is, of course, analog, what happens? We get further and further away. It starts to get bacon frying and that kind of thing. Where with digital, we kind of have this plateau effect where we're going until we're gone. And if you take a look at the graph, you're going to have a little bit better quality of audio signal. And for the people who really want to get technical, if we measure it on a DAQ, a digital audio quality scale on there, you'll notice that the DAQ rating is a lot higher with digital voice because it holds that plateau until you reach an approximately 2.5% to 3% bit error rate. Okay, back to normal language. You can hear it a little bit longer, more clearly. Okay. There's a myth and a concept that people say, oh, well, digital voice makes your signal go further. No, it doesn't make it go further. It just makes that same range of the signal, but it tends to make it cleaner, crisper. Okay. Now, some people like me, Okay. I'm this next category, which is the middle one, which I like to use digital voice in the full 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth. This is on your radios if you go into the VW mode, stands for voice wide. DN stands for digital narrow, obviously left hand side, we can see that. VW stands for voice wide. Okay. And people saying, well, why did they call it DW for digital wide? Well, that's on the right hand side, which we'll talk about data in a moment. But now what happens in this case is that with the voice wide mode, your audio still sounds great, sounds clear, it almost sounds a little bit more robust. Okay. But what happens in there, you don't have that sort of data air correction that's going with your voice. So what you tend to notice is that this might get into a little bit more of a fringe range. So if you're in VW mode, it might everyone kind of do one of the things on there so that while you're it might out a little bit, where with DN mode, you're getting more of that forward air correction. So you're not hearing as many dropouts as you might when you're doing VW mode. Funny little story about that. Back when cell phones first came out and first digital, my wife, back at that time, my girlfriend, I would joke around with her and stuff. I'd play it and she'd be like, hey, can we do this? And I'm like, I'm sorry. And then I screwed up one time. I had the radio on in the background too loud. And she says, I can hear the radio in the background, but she still loved me and married me. But that's a different episode. I'm safe. I'm okay. Thank you. All right. So now let's go to DW mode. That's the one on the far right. And what that is that is sending, in essence, what I like to call fusion telecommands. What is a fusion telecommand? A fusion telecommand is like when you push the wires X button on your radio to sync with the wires X node. When you send a text message, when you send a picture, when you send you like ping a radio in GM, if you ever use GM mode, okay, which kind of like will go ahead and send a packet burst out to one another on there to see if you're in range of that. That's all done in DW mode. Now, the thing about, once again, DW mode for data wide, that's what DW means, versus VW, which is voice wide, compared to DN, which is digital narrow, is you don't have forward air correction on the wide ones. So sometimes people saying, I can talk fine in a repeater, but I can't handshake with it, push that wires X button. Well, that's because you're in voice or data wide mode, and data and voice wide mode don't have that forward air correction. So that could be the thing on there. Now, this is the beautiful thing that we see here, which is all the radios. You should go out and buy some, support my retirement fund. All right. And what we're doing here is we have a ecosystem. That's how I like to call it, an ecosystem. That's the best term I found in the last couple months to describe it. Now, why is that? Well, because what you see on this page here lets you talk simplex, radio to radio. It lets you talk repeater, so radio to repeater. It lets you talk networked. It lets you talk radio to a network device that sends your voice down a internet, right? Or it has even a, how do you want to say, a conglomeration, I guess we can say, in that ecosystem that says, you know what? I can allow a person, by using simply just a handheld, to talk into a repeater, which can connect to other repeaters, which then can also connect to wires X, which then can go out and connect to other repeaters. That's why I kind of call it an ecosystem, because once you're in it, you can steer where you want to go. And that's either by what you have, by doing wires X, by connecting to a repeater, by just talking simplex, or like I like to do, using the FT991A or the FTX1, and you can actually talk 10 meter or 6 meter fusion. And I'll tell you, you really want to see how propagation works. You want to have some fun. Hop on 10 meters or 6 meters using digital voice. Whew, that is amazing. Absolutely amazing. There's actually a Facebook group that's committed to it. I don't know how many people are in Facebook, but it's the 10 meter C4 FM group. We use the frequency of 29.250. So we use an AM frequency, or I'm sorry, FM frequency, but it's using C4 FM. So therefore, you're okay by the confines of the ARRL and the FCC and band plans and all that stuff like that on there. But you'd be surprised. There have been times where there have been people that are literally in California, and they have had fusion conversations or beaconed out on fusion, and they're getting pings back from Japan. I did it one time here in northern Wisconsin. I got pings from Mexico, and that's running at about 50 watts on 10 meters on Fusion. So kind of a cool thing on there. That's why I said it's like an ecosystem, what you get into. And the best part about it is the ecosystem has outward lays. The reason we call it Yaesu System Fusion is because we fuse analog and digital together, right? Wires X can operate in digital or analog, or as we'll show later, can actually connect from digital to analog on there. Repeaters it's the only repeater on the market that you can go in digital, come out digital, go in analog, come out analog, or go in digital and come out analog. Yes, I said that right. Go in digital and come out analog, or vice versa, or go in analog or digital and come out digital only, or go in analog or digital and come out FM only. It has that ecosystem built into it. So simple form of communications, right? Radio to radio. Easy said and done. Okay. Handheld to handheld, handheld to mobile, doesn't really matter. You can do there. Group monitoring here. This is the cool part about group monitoring. It's a function on there. It's on Fusion Radios. If you ever look on it, it's like usually it says GM on there. A lot of people were like wondering, like, what is this button on here? And I'll kind of show it on the FT70 here by my finger there. It says GM. People are like, oh, good morning or good man, or what does that mean? Well, what that means is it kind of puts out that beacon. And I'm going to attribute it to, if anybody ever heard of ARTS, Automatic Range Transponder System, that back in the FM days, it used to send out it would key up your radio real quick, but it would send out a DCS tone. And if your DCS tone matched that other DCS tone, then your radio would pop up and said in range. And if it didn't hear it after a while, it would say out of range. So that's kind of on. Excuse me, I had a cough there. But what happens with group monitoring is you can select and it will ping out your radio. So it will do a little packet burst with your call sign. And if you have a radio with GPS built in, so like the FT5, the FTM 300 in this time, the 310, the 510, the 100, any radio that has a GPS on there, when it sends your burst packet, it will go and it will transmit that GPS signal also. What does that mean? Well, that means then I can actually take a look at my radio if it has GPS built into it, and I could see literally how far you are from me, which is kind of a cool concept down there. All right. Oh, there we go. Now, the other neat thing about our ecosystem is the repeater operation. Our repeaters were designed once again. Remember, I went back and said, what was the third rule? What was the third rule? Versatility and flexibility, right? One of the biggest problems with repeaters is that you got to program it with software, and it is what it is, right? It's got to be either VHF, it's got to be either UHF. It can't be both, right? Wrong. We broke the mold on this one. All of our DR1X repeaters back in the day, and now the current model, the DR2X, are multi-band. So VHF and UHF, you can go even say dual band, and multi-mode, meaning analog and digital. So as you see on the screen here, you can go from one handheld on UHF to that repeater, and then a repeater will receive it on UHF and then spit it out on VHF, and then vice versa. You go in on UHF on this side and it'll spit it out on VHF. So not only are repeaters able to operate VHF in, VHF out, UHF in, UHF out, it's also allowed to go VHF in, UHF out, or UHF in, VHF out. Now, why? Why would you do that? Because of that versatility. We wanted to make networks. We wanted to make systems that you need. Okay. So think about this. Think about linking. And the DR2X is another great thing on there. The DR2X actually has two active receivers. It's kind of a major concept for repeaters where you can use one receiver as your main repeater frequency, but then you can use that second receiver as like a link input frequency. What does that mean? Well, what that means is you could set your repeater up on your mountaintop, your tower, wherever it's at. And the A side could be VHF, receives VHF, transmits VHF. But let's say somewhere you have a remote receive site. Now what you could do with this repeater is you can go in on UHF and come out on VHF. So what you're doing is you have your remote receive site somewhere else that's receiving VHF far away, however, and then that comes and transmits out from that site on UHF, is received by this repeater, and then it repeats. Or you can do control with it. So there's a whole bunch of, once again, options into the DR2X. But let's talk about the equipment of Wires X. Now, before, let's give me a chance to take another drink. Before we get started, does anybody know how many Fusion repeaters are on the air in Japan? Now, before you say that, remember our home office, the nerve center of Yaesu is a Japanese company, right? So how many repeaters in all of Japan, from the northern tip to the southern tip, are on the air in Fusion in Japan? Does anyone want to take a guess?
No, Dan's looking it up. One.
I hear one. Guess what? That's still too many. Zero.
Right.
Zero. Now, the reason being is that there's an organization in Japan that is sort of like a hybrid between the ARRL and the FCC, and they're called the JARL. And the JARL specifies the different modes that you can use. Well, Fusion is not an allowed mode in a repeater operation. So you can't put up a repeater in Fusion. You can't do that. So how do you communicate with Fusion if you don't have a repeater, right? We in the US, we take for granted, right? We have repeaters. It's great, right? So Wires X was the solution to an issue. And what happened is that we had a network out there in the day called Wires. Is anybody familiar with Wires or Wires 2 on there? Okay. If you're not, that's fine. It was ahead of its time, really. It was sort of like what All-Star is and kind of Echolink before All-Star and Echolink. And what it did was it went along the aspects of saying, okay, here's what we got. We got a repeater, and that repeater has a 5-digit DTMF ID, like a extension, for sake of a better term. And then what would happen with that extension is you would then take and you can connect a repeater to a repeater, okay, in Wires X, or excuse me, in Wires, not Wires X. Wires X wasn't here yet. Sorry. Wires or Wires 2. And then what you could do is you could do what they call a sister group, where instead of maybe entering that 5-digit ID of the other repeater, what you would do is you'd enter maybe a 3 or a 4-digit ID. And then that was kind of like sort of like a group calling thing that you would dial that number on your radio, and then it would call out to all the repeaters and connect them together. Excuse me. Sorry. So what happened in that case is that we said, okay, if we can't have digital repeaters on the air in Japan, people still want to talk a great distance. So we took Wires 2 and we morphed it into Wires X. And the X part became the crossover. So now could you not only use digital, but you could also use analog, or you can connect analog to digital. And guess what did the transcoding for you? The network itself. Okay. You wouldn't have to worry about it. You would just select your node as digital. I would select my node, say, as analog. I key up an analog, goes into the network on analog. Analog shoots it out and says, okay, all the analog users, listen up. I'm going to send you this message. And then analog would say, okay, all you digital users here, boop, boop, boop. I repackaged it for you in digital. All listen up on there. And that's where the Wires X concept came in. So Wires X operates, if you really want to think of a better term, like the old, AOL, you've got mail, right? Okay. What it was is that you had AOL Instant Messenger, which was like you were chatting with someone directly. Wires X allows you to go node to node. Node A to node B, we're chatting on with voice. Great, happy times, right? Or AOL had group chat, right? The chat rooms. That's what would happen with Wires X. You would go into a room where there would be a series of nodes in there already. And then you're talking in your node into the room, which would then go out to everybody else in that room on there. So that's what it was. But the Wires X network, the HRI 200, also handled the aspect of what the network was simpler. And the reason is because each HRI 200 hosted the room. So Wires X was designed to be I'm going to say this as a technical term on there, which some people there, it is centralized and decentralized. So what centralized in this case means is what your common servers are, right? You go out to Google, it's a server, right? You go to a website, it's a server, right? That's the centralized part. You turn on Wires X, it calls out to the Yaesu server, and I'm pointing up here because I got my Wires X node up. But it calls out to that Wires X node or a server out there and says, "Hi, I'm node such and such. Tell people in the Wires X software that I am online, and here's how they connect to me." Now, the decentralized part comes into play when you connect node to node or node to room. And what I mean by that is that when I'm using Wires X and I connect from my node into a room, I don't go through the Yaesu servers. The Yaesu server is like a giant phone book. That's what it is. I click on the node I want to talk to or the room I want to talk to, click connect. The Yaesu network says, okay, you're going to go to this IP address in the world. Okay, you're going to go to it. So then it sends my audio traffic, not to the server, but directly to that other Wires X node or the node hosting the HRI 200 for the room. That's part of that flexibility and versatility. Why would you do that, John? Why is that? Well, because it eliminates failures. Okay. In the entire time Wires X has been up, so it's 2013. Wires X has only got offline 2 times. And the 2 times were for updates, for big updates. And it was off for maybe 4 or 5 hours. That's all it was. It really wasn't. But guess what? If you were already connected to a room, you didn't even know Wires X was offline because you're connected to that room. You're not connected to that server getting that data saying, oh, they have this node is this node. So if you have Wires X, you'll watch your list. If anybody has Wires X, the node list, the room list, every couple minutes it updates with people coming on, people coming off. You shut off your Wires X software, your computer, your node and everything, you'll go off that list. You turn it back on, it'll come back on that list. So that's what that updating is. But that's the genius part of the Wires X network. Now here's an HRI 200. The HRI 200 acts like sort of like a TNC. We're going to use that term on there so people understand, which is kind of like basically we're taking a computer language from the Wires X software on the internet and we're putting it into radio language. You'll notice there's the USB that connects to the computer, and you notice that it connects to the radios. And then when it connects to the radios, it's going to use these cables. Now, if you want to talk digital, you got to use a digital radio. Makes sense, right? So you can, like, if you have an FTM 100, 200, 300, 310, 400, either the D or the XD series, 500 and 510, they plug into the HRI 200, and they plug into your radio, and then your radio becomes a donor radio. And what it does is it sits there and it takes its controls now from the Wires X software, but you could use your radio to talk into that radio and then go down the Wires X network. And then you can go wherever you want on the Wires X network. You can stay in Colorado. You could stay in, the US. You can go wherever. All right. However, remember I said Wires X is analog and digital. Here's the cable. Look at that cable on the right-hand side. Does anybody notice what that jack kind of looks like? It's like a 6-pin mini DIN. That 6-pin mini DIN was a standard in packet operation. You could take a data radio that's capable. It doesn't even have to be Yaesu radio, but has that standard 6-pin data jack on there for like packet radio. You could plug that cable from the HRI 200 right into that radio, and now your node is operating as an analog node. Okay. But here's the cool part. Look at all these things here. So right now, I'm going to tell you a couple things. The radio on your upper left is an actual, I think that was the back of the FTM 100. The radio on the right is one of our analog radios. The repeater on the bottom left is the Yaesu repeater that you could connect the HRI 200 to. And the radio on the lower right, guess what? Does anybody know what that one is? The FT891. Whoa, wait a minute here. So you're telling me I could actually connect non-VHF, UHF, digital, no FM radios? I don't have to be VHF, UHF digital only. No, you cannot. You don't have to, I should say. You can connect analog radios to this. I know of a few people across the United States that have taken their HRI 200, plugged it into their FT891, and they use it as a feed for their FM 6-meter repeater. Great concept. All right. Now, 2018, we were at Hamvention. A lot of people are saying, John, the problem I don't like about the Wires X is because I have to get an HRI 200. Now, that's what happens when you got too much on your workbench. This is my HRI 200 here. Okay, here's my hand. It's not that big. It's a small little device, right? Problem is, when I have this, I have to have it connected to a radio. and the radio has to be a mobile radio. And you have to open up some ports. People don't like to open up ports. Some internet service providers don't like you opening up ports. So with that being said, what ends up happening here, I unplugged my note here. What ended up happening here is we said, well, wait a minute. What if there's an easy way, excuse me, to do this? And I was a good test case for this because when I would travel to California, the office, wherever, I couldn't do that. As a matter of fact, one time I was in a hotel I stayed at a lot, not too far from the Yaesu office when I go out to California. And one day I went and called down to the front desk and said, hi, hi, this is room 714. Can you go ahead and give me a non-natted global IP address on your internet network in the building here? And I also need you to open up UDP ports 46100 to 46122 so I can use some of my two-way radio equipment. So in about 7 minutes later, get a knock on the door. It's from the hotel manager, who thank God knew me. And he's like, I should have known it was you, John. And then he said, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know it was you. We're not worried. But that's a really weird request. And I said, okay, fine, cool. You're going to give me a little story because I wanted to prove a point. And I actually did a video on it. It was quite hilarious because I knew I was going to get that response. So what happened was we said, okay, wait a minute here. We're really limiting the usage of wires X if you only use the HRI 200. So we came out with PDN functionality. So what you see here is you see kits. You see an SU 57 kit. You see an SU 58 kit. Now the SU 57 kit works with the FT2, the FT3, and the FT5 only. Okay. The SU 58 kit works with the 100, 200, 300, 310, 400, D and XD series, the 500 and the 510. What it does here is it allows you to just connect these cables between your radio directly and your computer. So before you only used to be able to use mobile radio to connect to HRI 200, HRI 200 connects to your computer. Now I just take my computer, Windows computer, has to be unfortunately, connect with these kits to the radio, and the radio can then talk on the Wires X network. Maybe what was cooler about it is I could just use the radio with the microphone and the speaker on it to talk down, like a glorified speaker microphone, or I could use a handheld radio that can talk in Fusion to talk to that radio, which would then go down the Wires X network. So we announced it at Hamvention, Dayton, Xenia, in 2018. A lot of people said, great idea, John. Great. I said, cool. We tested it out, showed it a beta there. Everybody's like, oh, wow. But then afterwards, people were like, hey, idiot, you got some ideas. We got some ideas. So we took it back. We went to the drawing board. We said, okay, let's do this and this and this and this. So May came, June came, July came, and then August came. And then August, we were working on behind the scenes. So let's do some testing. So I said, okay. So I said, John, this is your realm, right? This is what you want to do, right? You want to work for Yaesu. You want to do this stuff here. No, I was already working for Yaesu before that, but they said, here, play. And I said, we want you to test it out because now you don't need this global natted IP network, all this open ports. You should be able to use anything that you can get an internet signal on, whether it's like using your phone, okay, as a hotspot or something like that. And they said, go forth and test, John. So I was like, okay, cool, fine. I'm going to go forth and test. So here I am. Picture it. So Sophia Patrol. I'm in LAX airport coming back from the office on a meeting. I'm from northern Wisconsin. I live where the wind hurts my face. Okay. You have some of that there too. I know in Colorado. Well, what happened is that here I am, dead of August. And I hate flying, by the way, immensely. I get worried and nervous thinking about flying. So not only is it dead of August, the airport is not cool enough for air conditioning. I'm sweating my brains out, nervous about my flight. And what do? Hey, what a great idea to sit at my gate, pull out a PC, connect a bunch of wires to it with some device that has an antenna to it. Okay, guess what? LAX and LAPD are like, hi, we're your new friends. Hi. Well, one of the people knew who I was and happened to be a Yaesu fan. Cause I think if they were an Icon fan, I'd still be in jail today, but that's a different episode. He comes up like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm testing this out because not only did I go and test it out and hook it up, but I'm actually talking on it right now. Right. It's like, oh, well, he's a random bag check over there. Okay. But so it was one of those deals where it was, but the theory tested because I was hopping. I'm sitting on the LAX airport Wi-Fi talking on my radio, getting added to a no-fly list. It was great. It was this amazing thing that happened with Wires X. And once again, took that, because I always said Wires X was limited, right? So it now went further. By the way, I boarded my plane. Everything was good. Okay. So now how do we use Wires X? This is the big thing. We all know how to use repeaters, right? We do. I hope everybody does, right? You put the repeater frequency in, you key up, you talk, you have a good day. So Wires X is a little different. Remember I said we could hook the HRI 200 to our repeater? Yes. We could talk on a repeater. But now what we could also do with Wires X, we don't have to use a repeater. We can do this example here. Now, this example is an elaborated example, but you're missing the computer. I didn't put a computer in there, but in essence, I could take my analog handheld on the right-hand side, or excuse me, left-hand side, transmit into the analog radio connected to the HRI 200, which is connected to the computer, which is going ahead and into the Wires X network. And on the other end of it, I'm coming out on a HRI 200, which is connected to FTM 100, which is then talking digital to an FT70. Once again, that's what I'm saying. It's versatile and flexible in nature. Sorry there. So what else can we do with it? Well, that was the node to node. Now here's the node to our room. So now we're coming in, happens to be analog, going in that room. Look at that. We got analog users, we got digital users. Everybody's talking. Everybody's having a good time. The only thing I'm always going to caution everybody on is digital to analog sounds great. Analog to digital does sound great, but if you have a bad analog signal in, it's not going to convert over nicely. So just keep that in the back of your head on there. Now, Wires X is great, but Wires X is for some people is a flaw. A lot of EM-commers, a lot of preppers and stuff, because I got to use the internet. You can't use the internet. The world's going to end. You can't use the internet. Okay. Verizon went offline last week and the world ended, I guess. I don't know. I'm a T-Mobile guy, but everybody who had Verizon, the world ended, I guess. We survived, but it ended. But IMRS, we said, you know what? We need to be able to link infrastructure. So when the DR2X came out, this is one of the biggest things that even I pushed for. When I got hired at Yaesu in 2017, one of the first projects I was put on right away was the DR2X. How can we improve it over the DR1X? One of the things on there was connectivity without the usage of the internet. So what IMRS is IMRS is using a LAN card, okay? Like your computer, LAN card, local area network card. And what we do is basically we're connecting via an IP routing system. Now, what do I mean by IP routing system? Well, like the internet, can I put it at one site and use the internet to link to it? Yes, I can. But it doesn't have to be the internet. It could be the intranet. So if you are on a private network, you can do that. You could send the IP traffic via a mesh network. Whatever you want to do, just to pass the IP packets out of the back of the one LAN card and send it over to the other one. However, we have done it. I've done it too, where we now have created LAN servers. Okay. Where if you don't want to connect just one repeater to one repeater to a group, you can connect into a server. So there's multiple ways how IMRS can work. But what the concept is very simple. Instead of using Wires X and doing room and node IDs and everything, what's happening here is we have a VHF repeater on the left-hand side. We have a UHF repeater on the right-hand side. Two respective bands, two respective groups of using the repeater. Each is using their own DGID. DGID is important because DGID is another feature we have in there, which is sort of like a CT CSS tone, but for digital. So, CT CSS tone, right? If I don't want to hear another conversation, I could turn on CT CSS encode and decode. And as long as it's not the same one someone else is using, I'm not going to hear it. My speaker's not going to open up, right? DGID is sort of that way with Fusion. It's not a talk group. It's not a talk group, but more of like a CT CSS tone. So if I don't want to hear people talking on a certain frequency, I could turn on, let's say, DGID 10. And then what ends up happening is if you want to talk to me in digital, you switch to radio, you transmit DGID 10. Now my radio opens up. Okay. But here we have these two people talking on each individual repeater, 4 people total. Now what's happening here is that before, I'm going to go back a slide here. Go back a slide. You see these people are only talking here via RF. Now let's say they're using DGID 99. We just randomly picked 99, for example, here. Now you see what happens is that if this person goes into the repeater on DGID 99, now what ends up happening is it links the two repeaters instantaneously for digital voice only. And now this user on the right-hand side, he was going in UHF, he was going in VHF, but they use DGID 99, and now they're communicating to each other using the two repeaters. This person here is using DGID 1. He's not listening to conversation, doesn't care. This one over here is using DGID 2, same thing. Listening to repeater, but it's not opening his radio squelch. He doesn't care. If you need him, call him on 2. But that's the great part about DGID and DPID usage. Now, what IMRS also does, it allows you to create a system of systems. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Well, it's kind of that, and what's sort of that ecosystem, right? So what I could do here is pretend these are 3 repeaters over on the side here, and they are all connected via IMRS. I go in this repeater, and it's going ahead on this repeater. It's going out to repeater 2 and 3. Someone comes in 3, goes out to 2 and 1. Now, these could be in the same building. These can be across the United States. They could be across the world. We've done repeater testing where I've been here in Wisconsin, and the group has been at the office of California, and there's been someone down in Texas, and we're testing and troubleshooting with a few things, and all 3 of us are talking like clear as day. Okay. Now, let's add Wires X into this, because I didn't say Wires X couldn't use IMRS. I didn't say IMRS could use Wires X. But now we make a system of systems, because now you have this FTM 310 or 300 here in this picture there that's feeding that Wires X transmission into one of the DR2X repeaters linked via IMRS. So now what's happening is those 3 are linked together. One repeater then kicks that same transmission out to Wires X. It can go out to Wires X, and another Wires X user can link it into their repeater system. Now you have a system of systems. Okay. I am either the owner or trustee of about 12 different repeaters right now. And with what I have for my network, I have in my dirty shack here, it's always under construction, by the way. I have 2 repeaters sitting here next to me. And those 2 repeaters are feeding the area. One is an IMRS repeater going out to the Wires X net, or not Wires X network, but crosses over to the Wires X network here, like in the picture. But my repeater is also going out to other IMRS repeaters out there, DR2Xs. They come into my repeater on that DGID, it crosses out to the Wires X network, and then it goes up north to my other 3 repeaters up there, which are connected on Wires X. So I have bridged the system together. Now, the also nice thing about this, here's a good case example. You're not going to see this in any other digital voice format. You're not going to see an RF linking solution like this. Nothing that can send a signal from an internet connected device out to a repeater system. Okay. You're not going to see that in any other modes. Okay. This Fusion allows you to go ahead and do that. Here's another really exaggerated version of it. Right-hand side here, you see the dude in Florida. He's got his 70s talking at a 2, the 400, the 100. This is kind of when IMRS first came out. It's a nostalgia slide is what I call it. And what happens here is this computer is connected into Wires X room. So people using Wires X going in directly here can talk to him here. But then this also connects out to a Wires X node feeding those repeaters. And this case example, the guy's in Florida talking through the Wires X node, which is California, which feeds the Anaheim repeater. And then Anaheim feeds Newport Beach, and Newport Beach feeds Long Beach. So in theory, you have someone in Long Beach, California on an FT70 handheld talking in their repeaters, which the network connects on the repeaters to the Wires X room. The Wires X room then connects out to the node, and the guy sitting on the beach in Florida trying not to get snow on, right? Because it's snowed in the panhandle. So it's trying not to get snowed on. He's talking back to California. Once again, system of systems, it's an ecosystem. All righty. With that, I don't hear any snoring, so things hopefully went right. So what I'm going to do here is we got to do our shameless plugs here. We have our YouTube channel, Yaesu USA Official. We do a lot of educational videos on there. We don't do reviews of our product or anything like that in there, but we do have educational stuff on there. We also have a Podbean, what do you want to call it? Podcast on there. It's hosted by Podbean, but check your favorite podcasting service on there. We took a break off kind of for the holidays. And then as you can hear, my voice was getting a little worse. So now we're back over that. We're going to start that up again here, but we do weekly episodes. We try to release one every week on Friday, except sometimes with events or stuff, we may not be able to. And then of course, the whole social media thing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now you have to see my ugly face. As I was told, I have a a face for newsprint and a voice for, well, I'm sorry. Was it a face for radio and then a voice for newsprint? That was what one of my fans said. And I'll let you determine the sarcasm there. But we're going to pause here real quick and I'm going to turn it back to you guys there. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, great presentation, John. Thank you so much. So let's open it up to the room. Does anybody have questions for John? I know I have one, but I'll defer. A lot to digest, right? A lot to digest. So John, one of the questions that I have, what's the difference between a room and a node?
Very good question. So basically a node is your entry point into the Wires X system. So you have to enter Wires X in through a node. Wires X, and I'm going to clarify this because this usually comes up. Wires X is a closed proprietary system. We've never hidden that. We've never denied that because we don't want it to be turned into a business network, right? I'm sure everybody could see like, wow, if you could link radios and stuff like that, you know, man, why couldn't we do the GMRS? Why couldn't we do this business radios? Why couldn't this and this? So we keep that sanctity of Wires X pure in that manner. So the reason is that that's where that node comes in. So you have to have a quote unquote node that you're accessing. Now, it doesn't have to be your node. So it could be someone else's node. So like, for an example, when I've traveled, I go out to the office in California as an example, we have a node at the office. I can access that node via my radio, just key up on the node if it's open. And then that lets me into the Wires X network. Then I can steer that node to a room or another node. Once again, a node is like a one-to-one connection. So my node to, let's say, my dad's node, only us are going to be talking. But in a room concept, like my room, like right now I'm looking at my room here and I have 3 nodes in it right now. So I see a couple other people that I know, they have their repeater nodes into my room. So when I talk from here into my room, that's going out to everybody that's in that room. Everybody's hearing it. So it's kind of like, once again, that kind of group chat with AOL.
How many active rooms are there currently in the US?
Let me see here. Let me grab my mouse here. Yeah.
Well, John's looking that up. Y'all better come up with some questions.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna actually kind of turn my camera here. I'm gonna pause it real quick. Once again, pardon my messy thing here. So we're gonna try to bank shot this here. Let's see if we can do it here. Okay. All right. There we go. That's the bottom screen here is all the rooms that are currently active in the world. So I'm just going to scroll.
Sure.
Still scrolling.
That's serious.
Still scrolling. And once again, this isn't once again, as you can see, there's USA, Japan, Australia, Ukraine. So if we really want to search it out here, we can go all the way. I'm going to do a reverse here. So here's the kind of the ones here I'll kind of do there. There's Ukraine, but here we go. So here's US. This is just US, as you can see there as a country.
Wow.
So that's who you can all talk to. And some rooms are super busy. Some rooms are super active. Other rooms are just, you know, hey, there's a couple of us that just kind of hang out there and stuff like that. And that's it there. But once again, oh, there we go. We switched in there from the USA to the UK. So the first one, because you can also organize by state. You can also organize by city, the room name if you want to, activity. So you can see how much activity is on there. So I'll scroll this up here. The most active room right now. Let's see here. Hang on. The CQ Japan, all Japan CQ rooms, the busiest. America KCY is the second one. The Filipino link, the Pinoy link, and then America Link, Texas Nexus, Northwest Fusion Group. The Western Michigan Connect Group, great group of guys there. So yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different rooms that you can connect to on there.
That's awesome. Thanks for showing that.
Yep. And here's all the active nodes. This one screen here is the nodes. I'm sorry. I'm holding up my camera too here, but here, I'll go ahead and show you here. We'll do the country again here. So these are all the nodes that are on currently in the US. So like my node is on there. If you add a node, so you can connect directly to these people, or these nodes are most likely in rooms somewhere, somehow. And You can hear me still scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So a lot of people are on Wires X.
Yeah, no doubt. That's pretty incredible. That's good. All right, we got some questions from the group here. So here's question number one for you, John.
Okay.
Okay, so I got my FT5, I'm nowhere near a computer.
Mhm.
How do I determine what rooms to go to? Or where can I get a list?
So that's a great question. So let me do it here. So you can actually go on line, and if you Google Wires, what is it? Wires X rooms list on there. I'll pull it up here real quick. You could actually go on there right now, and I'm gonna try to hang on a second here. Let me close this here real quick and pull up the Zoom meeting. I'm gonna share my screen here real quick. So this is from the website. Once again, Wires X active room list, but this actually shows you all the active Wires X rooms. That list I was scrolling on, that list is updated at the same time this is doing, so that they're paired. So if you have a Wires X node, you'll see the list change, and then this will change maybe 30 seconds later. So this is an active room list. So there you go. Now, let's say you don't have a computer. Let's say you're like, hey, I'm not buying my computer and everything like that. How can I do that? So with the FT5, you have the ability to handshake with a Wires X node. So if you're in range of Wires X node, you hit that Wires X button. It sends out a data, says, hey, can I connect to your node? The node will reply back and say, yeah, sure. What the heck? Come on. And then all of a sudden it's going to go ahead and your radio will do what I call the Addams Family theme, right? It will go doo 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 doo. And I mean, it does. It sounds exactly like that. And what ends up happening in that case then is that once you've connected to your Wires X node on the FT5, you can actually go into search. So if you know the room number, let's say you wanted to connect to my room, which is 21667, you could enter 21667 on your FT5, hit connect, and you would connect to the room. If you don't know my node number, but you know my room name, so we call ourselves Do Now, DUNOW, you could kind of enter DUNOW and then hit search, and then it will either connect to that room or it will show up everything that meets what you spelled out there on Do Now. So there's different ways to do it. Or you could just literally scroll through the same list on your FT5 that I have there. So I think it gives you about maybe like, I'm trying to think, like maybe 10 at a time you can scroll, and then it will re-ping, and then it will do the next 10 and the next 10 and the next 10. So you literally could either do what we jokingly call the TV remote with your FT5 to see what's on there, or enter the number or enter the room name.
Very good. A couple more questions here.
Hi, John. My name's Chad, November 0 Whiskey Kilo Papa. Fusion was the first digital mode I used and still my favorite. You mentioned rooms, Wires X being a closed standard. Obviously, many, if not most of those rooms are bridged to a YSF that people are getting in through hotspots, etc. Is Yaesu resistant to YSF? Do you embrace it as allowing people to get in through other modes? What's your thoughts there?
So let's look at what YSF is real quick. So you bring up a good point. Wires X is a closed network. The Fusion protocol is not a closed network. People think it's proprietary. People think so. Fusion Digital Voice, what we call a CAI, Common Air Interface, meaning when I'm transmitting with the Fusion radio, that is an open standard. Now, some people say it's not open standard because you need a vocoder. Now, there's other modes that needs vocoders too that are not open standard, right? But you could take the Fusion protocol and you yourself could make a Fusion radio if you chose to. Okay, that you could. Excuse me. Where it comes into play is that we don't want devices physically connecting to our network on there. So that's why it's the closed aspect. Now, talking about connecting out, we don't care what people connect the different networks on. We don't. What we do warn people is that YSF reflectors and Fusion protocol on devices such like hotspots or whatever actually was reverse engineered. And okay, fine, you want to do that. And once again, proving that our technology is not closed, Because if it was proprietary, let's face it, we're a worldwide radio company. We would be going after the people that reverse engineered it if it was truly closed net or proprietary digital voice technology. The issue runs into is that with this reverse engineered stuff, it doesn't have the same characteristics that the protocol stands up to. So I bring this up because our radios have a 2.5 to 3% bit error rate, meaning if the signal experiences more than a loss of 90, meaning only 97% to 98% of the signal comes through, that's great. We'll let it go. But if it's like 96 and a half, 96, 95% efficient of the signal for error rate, then we don't want it, because then it's going to do the, kind of what we did earlier. The issue that we run into with YSF and these hotspots is that it's reversed. It does not have a cutoff in that percentage. I have done, and we've done testings with like Zoom spots and stuff. I have pushed almost a 9% bit error rate into a hotspot and had it come out on the other end. Now, what people want to connect via the RF signal, what people want to connect via servers to different things, that's fine, not a problem. We go ahead and have a happy. Personally, like I said, I run a multi-mode digital voice room for people in Wisconsin here, and we cross the other modes in there. But I don't do it via RF. I do it via networking, and that's kind of where the concept is. As long as two things don't happen, as long as one, it's not crashing the WiresX network, it's not jamming the WiresX network, we don't care if you guys cross modes on there. The second thing on there is as long as it's not also hacking the network. We have had attacks on our network where people have tried to get into our network and try to false things out and stuff, and we've shut them down because, once again, we want to keep this as a amateur radio network. So if you want to link all you want. If you want to cross modes, cross everything you want. However, we're not going to allow devices like hotspots and stuff to connect into that network because it doesn't have that quality of standard that we want the technology to have. Does that make sense?
It does.
You know, it's just protective of our network is really what it is.
All right, got one more, at least.
Hey, good evening, John. My name's Scott. And quick question for you. We do have a DR2 repeater, DX2 repeater, that is set up on UHF right now.
Yep.
The VHF side of it is not being utilized. That is more for a control side of it.
Okay.
How would you perceive the best setup being to use that repeater locally? So we've got RF going into it from mobiles and handhelds.
Okay.
On UHF. Then there's a group of users that want to use it in just RF mode. Okay. Then there are some other users that would like to go into it to interface to the HRI 200 and go on to the internet and relink some other direction. Is there a better scenario to allow both of those user groups to have access to that repeater without interfering with the other group?
Let me just recap. So I understand it laying out in my head. So you have digital and analog users currently on the repeater. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they're both on UHF, correct?
Yes. Everything is UHF on it.
I'm sorry, say again.
Everything is UHF on that system for our users. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you have actually a couple options. So WiresX, even though it will cross mode, right? So you can go in on digital and come out on a analog WiresX node someplace else, those kind of things. What ends up happening in that regards is that it still has to have a feed of a specific mode. So it either has to go into WiresX on digital or analog. It can't have one node go both ways at the same time. Okay. A repeater can be AMS. So what you could do in this case is you could hook an HRI 200 to the repeater and then set in saying, you know what, the digital users want to use HRI 200 or WiresX. That would be the better way to say it. The digital users want to use WiresX. Analog users just want to talk locally, right? So what you could do then is you could have it set up that the Wires X node is only operating in digital, and then have people be able to control the Wires X node. So in other words, let's say you and someone else are talking on analog. You guys get done with your analog conversation. I'm going to come in through with digital. Now what I can do with my handheld is I can take my handheld, I can do the handshake with the repeater and the Wires X node, steer it to the room I want to go into, talk in that room, and then when I'm done, disconnect, and then the repeater goes back into that standby AMS mode kind of state on there.
Okay, got it.
So that's one of the ways to go ahead and do it. What I've seen more commonly across the US is sometimes kids don't like to play well in the sandbox together. So what they will do is they will take and actually have a VHF and a UHF repeater, and then they will basically make it so that they say, okay, listen, here's the deal. You want to go and use Wires X, you go on the UHF repeater and you can talk Wires X until your heart's content. You want to talk locally, go on the VHF repeater. Now, obviously there's a lot of cost to that, right? Having two repeaters, antennas, duplexers, all that kind of stuff like that on there. But that's sometimes how people did it, unless one of the other thing I've seen traveling across the US is that there was one repeater. I want to say it's in Florida. I can't remember now. But it'll come back to me. That they used to have analog drive time and fusion talk time. And it's like it said. So during the rush hours in the morning, rush hour, morning and evening, I think it was, so for certain times, a repeater can only be used in analog. If you were going into a digital, they would say, hey, can you please go over to analog? Because a lot of the users during rush hour, they wanted to make the repeater open at everybody. But then on certain nights of the week, they would have nets that they would hop into with digital. And then it was fusion talk time. And then during those nets, it was a digital only net. So tried to use repeater at that time in analog. It didn't work because there was a net time. So, and then the rest of the time was like AMS mode time. So that's kind of how another way I kind of saw to solve it. I hate to say it, but it's really political how your group operates. And I don't know how you guys operate, but that's what it kind of sometimes comes down to.
We try to keep the squelch loose. That's our go-to.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, I've had people where they come to me and you're just like, Walter from the Jeff Dunham things, like digital's the devil. And I mean, I've had people that have told me that digital is encrypted and this and this and this. And I'm just like, no.
Please stop.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the gallery's got questions?
Just a quick one.
Can you hear him, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, John, I'm Ray. I'm with Chad. If we wanted to have a room that was based off of high-powered rocketry, just that's a topic, we would just need a radio or two radios, an FTM 500, an FT5, and an HR 200. Is that what you need to create a room?
Yes, you would. So you would need an HRI 200, and then you'd have to interface it into a radio. So, and I say that because, some people might have a 100 laying around. They might have a 200 or 300 or 400 something. So some digital radio that they could interface the HRI 200 to, and then you'd have to have a radio that you talk into that radio, that room on. So that would be in essence your smallest amount to create your own room.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Now, let me go back on there one thing too. So also to remember, as an example, you could take then that room you created with that radio, because that radio is transmitting. Radio doesn't care if it's talking on simplex, doesn't care if it's talking into a repeater. You can actually point that Wires X radio, that donor radio, as we kind of call it, to like a repeater. As a matter of fact, I know there's a group in Minnesota, just because I'm like 19 miles from the Minnesota border here. I know there's a group over in the Twin Cities that they do that. They have a repeater similar to that kind of we described before, that they will turn their Wires X to the repeater during their normal nets and everything like that. And because the group agrees on that, but then when it's on the weekly net, the guy's like, it's my Wires X node. I want to go to where I want to go. So you once again, versatility, flexibility.
Thank you.
Who else? Going once? A lot of people looking around the room like, who did it? I got a question, I got a question. You have one, I'm on. Who else? Going twice? All right, you bought it. Very good. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So we'll give her a round of applause for John.
Thank you. Let me also say too, is I just want to extend it to you, Dan. I believe you have my email address, correct?
Yes, sir.
So do not be afraid to give out my email address. Once again, as kind of my thing is I do help with the technical support department. I do work a lot like specialty stuff, like with the repeaters and whatever. But if you ever have any questions, I know some people don't like to ask questions in public forums and stuff. Shoot me an email. There is no dumb question. This is all new. It can get very confusing. Even if it's something like, hey, John, I got a question. You presented to us. I'm looking at Fusion and I'm looking at this mode. Help me understand the difference of how the two work or whatever. I'm here for whatever you need. So don't be afraid to email me. If there's a delay getting back to you, it's nothing personal. I just get so many emails a day and stuff like that. Plus also too is factoring in travel time and everything of where I may be headed or whatever. So feel free to reach out to me anytime directly.
Will do. No, much appreciate that. And again, you're a pretty busy guy, not only professionally, but obviously with family and keeping up with volleyball games and probably some travel schedules there. So again, thanks for taking time out of your schedule. Certainly, you are a great ambassador to amateur radio, and thanks for spending some time with the Parker Radio Association.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Have a great night. Thanks again, John.
Take care, everybody.